Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Bank of America, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Antares Investment Partners, Arbor Realty Trust, Athena Group, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Helmsley Spear, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Jackson Development Group, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Moynihan Organization, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, Sutphin Properties, the Wyckoff Organization, Extreme Construction and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of the Stoller Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. Everybody loves Brooklyn. I love Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to college in Brooklyn. I still visit Brooklyn. Brooklyn's great. And there's a lot of residential development taking place in Brooklyn. So today I brought three guys who really know what's happening in downtown Brooklyn more than anything else. And I'd like to focus on what's happening in downtown Brooklyn and the surrounding area. My guests today are Robert Levine. Robert is the president and CEO of RAL Companies and Affiliates. I wasn't going to say it. Okay. David Kramer, principal and Maca at the Hudson Companies. Okay. Maca. Okay. And last but not least, the second Willentis, okay? Jed Willentis, principal at Two Trees Dumbo, and Two Trees Management. So, guys, you're doing this magnificent project. You got the waterfall. You really, nothing has sold for $1,000 in Brooklyn. What are you doing in Brooklyn? Tell my audience about this Brooklyn Bridge project.
Well, our project was, for years, I would drive past the former Jehovah's Witness property at 360 Furman Street. It's approximately 1.5 million square foot building. It was constantly screaming at me to be converted to a residential building. The likelihood of that happening was virtually unthinkable for many years until the Jehovah's Witnesses realized there was a real opportunity in them selling that property. At the same time, the city and state...
But this was a warehouse, wasn't it?
It was a warehouse, right. At the same time, the city and state came to an agreement to finally construct, after 20 years, Brooklyn Bridge Park, which surrounded 360 Furman Street on three sides. So we pursued the possible purchase of that building, and at that time the Jehovah's Witnesses actually started to market it. And it became quite an adventure, which is what we've come to call it, because for close to a year they marketed that property. Probably every developer in New York City was sought after it, and it became a quest, and it became actually, at the end of the day, it became a test and a quest, because actually our ethics were tested, and finally at the end it was down to 3 people. They spent time in our offices, met our entire organization, and finally selected us because price no longer became an issue, because a number of people were prepared to pay the price. Their demands were unreasonable, but we met them. And
so what are you building there? I mean, this was a warehouse. I mean, we'll talk about his thing in Dumbo.
RAL was founded basically as we come out of a group of architects and engineers and designers, and basically built our development company on the basis of the designs that we do and the different way we approach projects. This was we looked at it in terms of a conversion to residential. It actually will house, and as it's nearing completion, it will house 449 residential units, 132 condominium parking spaces, a 500-car attended parking facility, and close to 100,000 square feet of retail in the base.
And cabanas.
And cabanas. Let's not forget the cabanas, because the cabanas are very important, which I learned from Jed and his father. Because, you know, when you can sell roof area.
So you're selling these apartments for $1,000 a foot?
Well, we have the building is truly a community. It has units that range from studios to 5-bedroom units, and it has prices that range from $600 a square foot to $2,000 a square foot. So there's an average.
And you were telling me and the guys before the show, the parking spaces are sold for how much?
The parking spaces, which are the condominium parking spaces, which you own and it's yours with direct access, you park yourself, you do everything, are selling anywhere from $130,000 to $170,000, depending upon the size.
That's a watermark. I mean, because I think the highest I had heard in maybe Prospect Park was like $50,000, David?
Now, can buyers finance those parking spots?
Yes, they can.
And the difference in price between the lower range and the upper range
is the size.
It's not the view of the parking spot?
No view on the parking spot. The parking spaces are in an internal mezzanine that we constructed that have no views, you know, and they basically.
And tell me about the cabanas.
The cabanas, you know, they're rooftop cabanas. They're completely.
How big are they?
Enclosed. They're enclosed on 3 sides, and they have a half a roof. They have electric, gas, and water.
Oh, you bring them gas.
And we're giving them gas too. Yeah, see, that's something.
Second generation.
Yes, I know.
Gas.
I knew you wouldn't give them gas, you know. But we have, you know, they have electric, water, and gas. They're actually beautifully finished. They have dividing walls of masonry. The rear walls are extruded metals and different, you know, decorative metals. The roof is the floors are, I believe,
like Rockaway with the
it's not
the
like
bungalows.
It's not like, understand something, it's not like when we grew up. I grew up in Brooklyn as well, and that was, the
Brighton Beach Private was the cabana.
The big deal back then was that Silver Gold Club in Breezy Point.
That's
right. That was, if you made it
Army
there.
Reserve, I remember.
If you made it there, you were the king.
All right, let's bring you guys back.
Okay.
Okay. Robert should really be applauded because. Real estate developers have a certain reputation in the world, and
we know about yours.
But here's a deal where you took a huge risk. You were the high bidder on a huge building that wasn't a slam dunk. It's next to the BQE. You have to walk down Drollman to get there. You then threw your hat in with the Brooklyn Bridge Park plan. Which was a political hot potato unto itself, and you couldn't sell condos until the plan was approved.
Correct.
And the EIS was approved. And so we took a risk with that, and now the condominium common charges are actually going to help pay for the revenue of the park.
Can I ask you something? So he's been truly a pioneer. What
have I done?
I mean,
who am I contributing to?
J Condo in Dumbo? I mean, what's J Condo? And now you're building in the Gowanus? Near Whole Foods? I mean, what are you selling? Are you going to give them a card that they can go into Whole Foods, you know?
My joke is that the name of our project in the Gowanus, which is a block and a half from the first Whole Foods in Brooklyn, I'm calling it Aisle 14 because, there's a real, you could make a lot of money just having a Whole Foods strategy. And certainly the history has been where Whole Foods goes into certain transitional neighborhoods, it has a huge impact. So
no question.
Whole Foods
$82 a foot.
We follow the artists. You follow Whole Foods.
That's right. That's right. There are various real estate strategies.
So tell us about what's J Condo.
J Condo is a 33-story condominium that we finished basically this spring summer. It's in Dumbo, next to Manhattan Bridge.
Please, everybody said, how did your father, and we'll get back to J Condo, create the term Dumbo? I mean, it's like Two Trees. That was a farm, but I mean, how was Dumbo?
We didn't get credit for creating the name, really. We certainly put it on the map. We did not create it. The artists that were there before us created it. In fact, David, we were doing the Silk Building at 14 East 4th Street close to 30 years ago now. So he asked one of the artists, where's the next hot neighborhood? And they said, go to Dumbo. He said, where the hell is Dumbo?
And for my audience, Dumbo means the acronym down under
Manhattan Bridge Overpass.
Manhattan Bridge Overpass. And you're next
Sometimes
to the
they
Brooklyn
forget
Bridge,
the overpass.
right?
Manhattan Bridge.
You're next
It's
to
really
Manhattan.
between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge. for the
And
most
what
part.
about Gowanus? All joking aside, what are you doing in the Gowanus?
We bought a site that's as of right. Most of the stories you hear about the Gowanus are sites that either Toll Brothers or Boimo Green or different people are looking at, or even the public place RFP.
Let's talk about your site.
That have to be rezoned. This is an as-of-right deal on 3rd and Bond, R6 zoning. We're building on 180 feet of frontage. 180 feet, yeah.
How many
townhouses? Townhouses. And what we're doing is individual 4-story townhouses with floor-through condominiums, duplex on the ground floor. And our thinking there was that if we went with the townhouse construction, as opposed to concrete or even plank, that there would be some cost savings in doing that sort of low-scale development.
How much are these? What are you contemplating that these units will sell
$800 a
for?
foot.
$800 a foot.
$750 to $850.
So you're a
And is there
pioneer.
no cost
You're
savings?
also being a pioneer in Gowanus. I mean, there's nothing. Is there anything selling or there has?
You know, there are enough comps. There's a lot going on in the 4th Avenue corridor. There's enough going on with different projects, smaller projects that have happened in Carroll Gardens. You know, but part of it is just having an instinct about walking the block and thinking about how comfortable prospective buyers are going to be. So there's a location. It's 2 blocks from the F train. There's all sorts of developments that will eventually turn into a Gowanus residential development. There's Whole Foods 2 blocks away. There are comps up and down 4th Avenue. And I'd rather live at 3rd and Bond than on 4th Avenue.
Okay. Now you have Whole Foods, and you have Trader Joe's.
Brought Trader Joe's.
You brought Trader Joe's to Brooklyn, and you know, if you want to talk about Trader Joe's, I don't know, Robert, if you've been there.
Yes. Yeah.
The Trader Joe's in Manhattan on 14th Street. I was there in my crazy desire to walk around and see every building and anything. I walked in there one Sunday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there were 80 people online in Trader Joe's.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, the line was around from the beginning to the end.
That's always a good sign where you look. It's a good sign of success when you look for the person with the line, with the sign saying "line ends here," which you have in Whole Foods at Union Square. You have it at Trader Joe's. Hopefully, one day we'll have it at Atlantic and Court.
Yeah, but what are you doing over there besides putting a Trader Joe?
We bought the site from the Independence Bank people, and we knew we needed a retail tenant for the old bank space. We're building about 30 apartments on the adjacent site. But diagonally across the street, 3 years ago, we built Courthouse, which was 321 rental apartments, and we just completed 110 Livingston Street, which was 300 condominiums.
Now, 110 Livingston
blocks
Street
away.
is an interesting thing. You know, that was the old Board of Education.
Old Board of Education building. Before that, the home of the Benevolent Order of the Elks. It was built as an Elks Club back in the 20s.
And what you
by
do over
McKinley
there
and
at
White.
110 Livingston?
Did a total gut rehab. It had been the Board of Ed, obviously. It was politicians all took credit for disbanding the Board of Ed and Mayor Bloomberg, et cetera. Converted the building to 300 condos. Were able to add a bunch of space to the top, which was technically very challenging. We had no structural drawings, no real drawings of the building at all. So we literally had to take the whole building apart, demolish everything inside, measure all the columns, evaluate all the connections.
And how much did you sell the condos over there for?
We probably averaged about $800 there.
And
one
in
time.
Dumbo, for my audience, I mean,
About the
your dad
same.
has. How many buildings did you convert in Dumbo?
10 years ago, we converted 1 Main Street to 124 apartments. We started at $250 a foot. We're probably at $400 by the time we were done. We then did 30 Main Street, the Sweeney building, probably 5-6 years ago, and sold those in the $600 range. And 70 Washington Street was 269 apartments, and those were probably about $800 a foot a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, something like that.
And you know, as all of you, we were saying prior to the show, I went to downtown Brooklyn. I always ride around. I mean, there are 14,300 units planned for downtown Brooklyn. Do you think are they going to be built? What do you think is going to happen in downtown Brooklyn? Because you have a unique project. You've had unique projects, and even the 30 condos you'll sell.
It'll be rentals.
There'll be rentals, which will be a problem. and you have, I love you anyway. You have unique projects over there, and I think the town has this. But what about these glass towers in the middle of Fulton, on Flatbush Avenue or on Schermerhorn Street? Not your property, because 110 Livingston was further up. Closer to the Heights, closer to.
It's a different neighborhood.
Different
It's a
neighborhood.
And I think, the three of us have always chosen properties that kind of have intrinsic value, and they're all special sites. I mean, David and I 3.5 years ago, when we were at a Brooklyn Bridge Park Conservancy thing, when you were breaking ground, we thought we were ahead of you, but with dealing with the city and state was another thing. But there's a perception, and unfortunately developers are truly optimistic all the time, or else they're not
Don't
very
we
good
have to be?
or else they're not very good developers. And it's this I don't know if the critical mass is what's going to make it happen in downtown Brooklyn, but everybody is under this perception that that's what it is, and it's proximity to mass transit and some of the other things. And I think it's also just this the perception, that has bred over the past 2 years that, just no matter what you build will be received.
And I think part of the situation, what David, and I think you did it, Jed did, and your dad did years ago in Dumbo, you had to make some amenities. And that's what you're doing also. You have 100,000 square foot of retail, you're going to make some amenities. There aren't amenities on Flatbush Avenue over there.
Eventually, if the kind of densities that are being bandied about, come to fruition, then the retail services will follow, just as in Dumbo and other neighborhoods, Williamsburg, where there's enough developments, the retail follows.
But let's
the question is, are those residential developments going to be successful?
Correct. And let's look at there. I mean, the Williamsburg Savings Bank, which is the tallest building in Brooklyn, Ionic. Built in 1929, beautiful property, is being converted today. But the Williamsburg Savings Bank is right next to the Atlantic, to Atlantic Avenue Station. It's near Brooklyn Academy Amusement. It's Fort Greene. It's over there. I don't know how many people really want to be on top of all the subway stops. So that's a question. Then you have Dean Palin with the Oro, and then you have some other. I mean, the Kaposha's building something over there. And then this other Precita property over there. I mean, I don't know. I'm very positive about Brooklyn, but I'm a little worried about all of this coming on the market at the same time.
And I also think there's a difference between if your project's a condominium or if your project's a rental. If your project's a rental, like Avalon only does rental buildings, then they can have the long-term patience to see as the neighborhood develops, so that 15 years from now, Avalon can look back and say, that was awfully prescient of us to build, a
But you need strength.
Right,
It
but
depends how much equity you want to have.
Avalon is
right, exactly. So Avalon can afford to be patient. The issue with the condominiums is that it's all a question of timing when your condominium hits the market. Correct. And when Two Trees was building its first building in Dumbo, when you were a pioneer in Dumbo, he could afford to charge $250 a foot because of his land basis and because of hard costs, what they were then. And the challenge for new construction condominiums in the pipeline today for downtown Brooklyn is that they didn't get a deal on land unless it's some long-term landowner. They're not getting any break on where construction costs are going. So from a timing standpoint, they're going to be hitting the market where they can't afford to charge pioneer prices for condominiums. And the Oro, which we know is asking $700 to $800 a foot, is already sort of dated from when they bought the land and when they bought out the building. And projects today don't even have the kind of economics of the Oro.
And what about One Prospect Park? Not One Prospect Park, the Richard Meyer building.
Property.
That is on Prospect Park.
On Prospect Park. What about that?
That's a whole other conversation. That's not a
downtown Brooklyn, but
conversation.
But what about that building? I mean, it's a glass building. It's a different type of building.
But they bought that land very cheap too.
Yeah, I know they bought it cheap, but I understand that they're 8-foot ceilings.
Right. I was just going to say, there are characteristics of buildings that also make buildings appealing to buyers. One Brooklyn Bridge Park has 13-foot 6 ceilings. Okay, Jed's buildings.
Most of our projects have, even
okay,
our rental
are all-
properties, nothing's less
and,
than 9 foot clear.
You know, there's a difference between new construction and what you do with new construction, and you know the things you do, and I think people are becoming, as the market tightens, people become much more aware of those things as well and start to weigh those variables. One Brooklyn Bridge Park, what we did was, you know, the building's enormous. Okay, so we had a lot of space that, you know, typically we design a building and you try to put amenities in. And you say, you know, you start with your list, and we have a list, and yes, you always want a great gym. You know, what would you like? Would you like a children's playroom? Sure. Can I afford it? Can I put it in? Can I have this? We ended up in Brooklyn Bridge Park with 2 amenity rooms on every floor, so basically 28 different amenities, everything from a driving range, you know, a virtual golf center, to children's music room.
Bocce court?
No bocce. It's, you know, we try not to,
It's on
but
Atlantic
anyway,
Avenue.
but we can accommodate it, you know. Anyway.
I
No,
mean,
but what
active
I'm
adult
getting at-
communities will have
28 rooms
bocce.
of amenities. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
No, and
You
our
probably had to
20
like have
there's-
brainstorming sessions to fill the rooms.
We did. We actually ended up with a children's music room. We ended up with, you know, party rooms, you know, these different. But what I'm getting at is that, you know, there are things people begin to look for. You know, in Dumbo and in, you know, David and Jed's buildings, people knew what to expect. You know, they went into a property and it was, you know, you had great light and air, you had high ceilings, you know. They knew what to expect on the kitchens and those things because it was consistent.
Doing a high quality job makes a big difference.
But you
at the end of the
know,
day.
I as I said, I was in Brooklyn yesterday, and I was on 4th Avenue, and I see all of these new buildings. You know, it's not downtown; it's Park Slope. It's really you know, 4th Avenue, depending on where it is a different case. Are these buildings all going to do well? I mean, you know,
You want-
I don't want to. I don't
You
want
want the
to.
3 of us to say that?
I want. You know, I think, you know, we were saying the week before when I had the money for lending, that lenders today will do business with the Two Trees, with the Hudson, with the RAL companies, because it's relationship, and you're established, and you've had your good times, you have your bad times. I mean, fortunately, most of them have been good. But the idea is, there are these people, David, and you know that, who bought a piece of property, and they said, I'm going to be a developer. And
Yeah,
When the
I
credit
think I
markets
would-
get loose enough, everybody becomes a
Right.
developer.
And that
So
happened in the
it
early
brings a lot-
90s, and it's happened again.
And the market has saved so many of those
Right.
developments over the last 10 years. I mean, I've
Absolutely.
been completely wrong about 4th Avenue. I turned down most of those developments because I walked around and thought, I'm not into
Hey.
it, I wouldn't live there. And the issue, I think,
We were
today is that it's harder and harder for those projects by first and second time developers to succeed now and going forward. That over the past 10 years, the market has saved a lot of those projects that you could make mistakes on unit mix, on unit type, on amenities, and still succeed.
And what happens, because we are in a credit crisis? I don't care what anyone will say. There's turbulence in the credit in the financial markets, and we're in a credit crisis. Won't this have an effect also on the sales of units? I mean, even on your project right now.
It has. I'll tell you, it has not had an impact on our Brooklyn project or our Chelsea projects. Okay. Outside of, we have a number of projects outside of New York. It has had an impact on our projects in Colorado Springs. It has had an impact on our projects in Denver. You know, across the country, it has had impact. It has not impacted it here as much because most of our buyers have banking relationships, and they're also buying apartments that
But
are.
you see, in certain aspects, you know, when I do things and people on panels, and David has been on a number of them, people talk about this, what we would call Manhattan-centric. Now I'm talking about Brooklyn. Brooklyn, and it's like the Queens. We were talking about the Long Island City when you were on my panel. You know, everybody, you know, when the markets change, people look at different things. When the prices aren't there, you know, you go to Brooklyn because
Well,
it's
they
a
retrench.
local-
You know, it's like when Lower Manhattan was not functioning, everybody went to Jersey, you know, and then they came back to Lower Manhattan. You know, I think again, and you know, we're dancing around the answer that you really want to hear.
I want the truth.
But the reality is
You
that
can't handle the truth.
you know, the reality is that, you know, you go back to what I said before, the intrinsic value of certain real estate, its location, its views, its light and air, its different things like that. You go to the Brooklyn, the 360 firm in the Brooklyn waterfront, or you go to properties in Dumbo or 110 Livingston Street, or you go to the J in Dumbo. Those are in those prime locations where you have views and you have all the things that go with it.
I would take it a step further, and I hate to be the optimist when all you read about are credit crunches, but I think that in general, Brooklyn residential real estate, it is an enormously exciting time for the borough, not just residentially, also in terms of retail, hotel, and I take
come
it
on.
beyond.
We're not going to talk about hotels. Too many hotels in Brooklyn. Don't give me this.
But I agree with you. I think the New York market is fundamentally strong, and Brooklyn is still, Brooklyn's a city of 2.5 million people. All by itself, Brooklyn is the third or fourth largest city in the country. I think it's still way underserved in terms of lots of things, and we won't get into retail and hotels. But I think you're going to see deal flow slow down because of the credit issues out there. I also think you're going to see deal flow slow down because, quite honestly, I think that the exorbitant rise in construction pricing has taken a huge amount of the profit out of our deals. Land pricing is going to be slow to adjust down, and 5 years ago we built Court and Atlantic for $200 a foot. Today you're looking at $300, $350.
$350, yeah, at least,
So all of a sudden, and the condo market just doesn't go from $800 to $1,000 because construction pricing increased.
A quick comment. David's been on my show on 421As. What effect
I was just going to add that
is
to
the 421A going to have on Brooklyn? Because you were talking prior to the show, it's had an effect on your conversion in Manhattan because the maintenance is higher and people have to pay a higher price. What's going to happen with the projects in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
The ones that can't be in the ground before June 30th?
I mean, we were talking about Dumbo and View buildings, but what's happening in Brooklyn is that there's been enormous growth and development and a lot of exciting projects in the Fort Greene, Prospect Heights, Clinton Hill, Windsor Terrace parts of the world. As basically the development spreads out from the water. And we have a project right now in Clinton Hill. We have a project in Bushwick. And the 421A change in tax policy is going to, it basically exacerbates the transactional problem that Jed was just discussing. And we're going to see it happen over the next 2 years.
To talk about downtown Brooklyn in Brooklyn takes more than 30 minutes. And David, you've been here many times with me on various shows.
Robert,
Robert,
like the Charles Nelson Riley.
You are the Charles Nelson Riley of the Stoller Report. Robert, you'll be back. Jed, you'll be back. Hey, it depends.
Great.
Hey, no. Hey,
Not invited back.
No, you'll be invited back. No,
Kiss the ring.
But no. Okay, I'd really like to thank Robert Levine, David Kramer, and Jed Woodlantis for being here today. See you next week.
Thank you.
Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Bank of America, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Antares Investment Partners, Arbor Realty Trust, Athena Group, BRT Realty Trust, Burden LLP, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Helmsley Spear, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Jackson Development Group, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Moynihan Organization, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, Sutphin Properties, the Wickoff Organization, Extreme Construction and Deconstruction.